or black truffle paste.
All right.
And this is the first time I've sliced and cooked with my own truffle. So I had this moment where I was like, why doesn't this smell like I think it should? Is it a fake or something? I didn't. I got a real winter black truffle, or tuber melanosporum, from Europe. But this is where I realized we've kind of been misdirected for years with a lot of the truffle products that are out there. Now, we need to nerd out a little bit and talk about some sciencey terms, but I promise this will all make sense. So, if you've ever had anything truffle flavored, a truffle oil, or truffle paste, the most common synthetic flavor ingredient added to it is 2,4-dithiapentane. So, why is 2,4-dithiapentane so important? Well, if you take a look at this table from an overview on truffle...
I care less about that, right? We care less. You can pop this out. All right, we are good. We're going to go into single player for this. I'm just kind of got to figure out how I want to set it up, right? So I think... all right. So what do I want here? Let's look at the different storage things. Storage, system, setup, Minecraft.
We love home internet from T-Mobile.
Right, like I know there's a couple of them.
Hello everyone, my name is Nuvola and welcome to another video. Today's video is an automatic storage system which stores up to 32 different items, all automatically sorted, and of which 8 are in bulk storage like this, using a light indicator to show you how much you've got left. Also, there's a lot of space for manual storage upstairs, which I tend to decorate a little bit. I'll show you at the end of the video what I made of it. Without further ado, let's get into the build. Let's go! On screen you can see the layout of the build. It's 31 blocks long and 17 blocks wide. And we're gonna start off by digging out all of these holes, which should in the end be 5 blocks deep. The other holes are 1 block deep, and this is where we'll create a floor out of spruce planks and stripped spruce wood. In the 5 block deep holes, we'll create the bulk storage units. Okay, let's head on and make one of these bulk storage units by first making a stripped spruce pillar on the sides.
Hello everyone, my name is Pixelriffs and welcome back. Long in a chain, this filter is going to extract any spruce planks. 2 pieces of redstone dust running out.
Okay, so... oh, I see. Like,
and then we're going to build the most basic item.
Most basic item sorter. That's what I want, right, people? Most basic item sorter. You've got the hopper. I know you have redstone. Right? I'm pretty sure you have torches and comparators. We'll start with just that. And what do I want for my block here? And for a block, I mean, it really doesn't matter what the fuck I use, right? It's just a block. It's let's just go with white concrete. White concrete powder. White concrete. We'll go with white concrete. Okay. Alright, let's go.
Filter. This is not the filter we're going to be using for the rest of the video, but it is probably the smallest item filter we can make, the fewest number of ingredients to create a functional standalone item filter. First of all, behind this hopper we need to dig a 3-block long hole with 1 space dug out between these 2 blocks. That's where we're going to place a bunch of stone just as a temporary building block to run redstone components on. We're going to dig out the space underneath this hopper and we're going to place a redstone torch attached to that stone block. Then we're going to put a redstone repeater in this space here. We're going to hold shift so we can cover that over with another stone block, place another stone block there, and we're going to place a comparator facing this way with 2 pieces of redstone dust running out of it, like so. Then we're going to take a second hopper here, so we're going to be using for the
right, so this is a simple one, right? So he's got 1, 2, 3. Right, and up front here, we have the chest. Well, let's see.
Rest of the video, but it is probably the
Let's see how this
smallest
works,
item
right?
filter we can make, the fewest number of ingredients to create a functional standalone item filter. First of all, behind this hopper, we need to dig a 3-block long hole with 1 space.
Okay, so that's actually going to be the item hopper is going to be over here. Right, so our chest will be here. Is that where our chest is? I don't fucking know. Chest is here, I think. Our chest is here. Right there and right here. Alright, and then we got the item hopper facing into the chest. Boom, like so. Is that how it went? Let's see.
Dug out between these 2 blocks. That's where we're going to place a bunch of stone just as a temporary building block to run redstone components on. We're going to dig out the space underneath this hopper, and we're going to place a redstone torch attached to that stone block. Then we're going to put a redstone repeater in this space here. We're going to hold shift so we can cover that over with another stone block, place another stone block there, and we're going to place a comparator facing this way with 2 pieces of redstone dust running out of it, like so. Then we're going to take a second as detecting the contents.
No, I got that backwards, don't I? He has it this way. Alright, and then we got a piece here. Right, and then this comes off. No, that stays there. And we have a comparator here, facing this way. Right, and then we have another, this thing, oh. Shift like that, right?
Of this hopper at all times. It's going to be telling you how many items are in this hopper and outputting that in the form of a redstone signal. Comparators will detect how full a container is. So in this case, this container is not very full. It hasn't got to the maximum capacity of items and is only outputting a very weak redstone signal strength. It's only outputting a strength of 1
welcome to the stream.
here.
Make sure you subscribe.
In order to activate the
say
circuit,
hello.
it has
Feel
to
free
contain
talk in
enough
chat.
items that the redstone signal strength
Also, you can
increases
join our
to
Discord.
2,
You can talk to me live.
activating this redstone dust, which in turn will activate this repeater since it's checking for power in that block, and the repeater turns off this redstone torch. The redstone torch being on locks this hopper, meaning no more items can travel through it. So when we add some more contents to this hopper and the circuit activates, this redstone torch switches off, allowing items to flow through this hopper and into the storage chest. Now, one very important thing to note is that the hopper above is facing in towards this comparator and not downwards into that hopper. This is because hoppers have push and pull functionality. When they are not locked by a redstone power source, they will attempt to pull items in from any containers above them, including other hoppers. But whichever way the output of a hopper is facing, it will also try to push items in that direction. So when setting up your item filters, it's important to make sure that the hopper is facing outwards towards either the redstone circuit or perhaps towards the chest, but not down into the hopper below it. Hopefully that made sense, and now we're going to try something else. We're going to make a second item filter circuit next to this one, and this will really demonstrate why we're not going to be using this particular design of item filter. So here we go. I've created a second item filter identical to the first one. It's got all of those items in the hopper already, so the filter items are set up, and we just need to add in whatever type of material we want this slice of the filter to filter out. So we've got the spruce planks on this side. It makes sense that we'll have some oak planks on this side. You'll notice at the back here, the redstone dust connects because the dust can't be told whether or not you want it to maintain an individual line or if you want it to connect up as though it's all one big circuit. It will always connect to the dust next door. And this becomes a problem for item filter circuits because you'll notice the contents of this filter here are going to be affected by whatever this redstone dust does, because once this reaches a certain level of power, it's going to power the neighboring circuit as well. Let's put in the 32 oak planks that I brought with me, and you'll notice underneath there, both of these redstone torches switched off. The other one is now switched back on, but you'll notice that in that time, our filter circuit on the right-hand side here that was filtering spruce planks has broken. While this filter has now successfully filtered all of the oak planks down into this chest, our spruce filter has let through a bunch of the stone blocks and now has 2 empty slots in this top hopper. And you can imagine that if we had a chain of hoppers or a water stream transferring items over the top of this hopper would now be able to pick up anything, and it would not filter out specific items like we need it to. That is all because this redstone dust at the back here connects, and once the comparator reaches a certain signal strength, it's going to activate the neighboring circuit, which will deactivate that redstone torch and drain any of the contents of this hopper, regardless of whether or not you want it to. And that is why we're not going to be using this item filter design, and we're going to be very specific about the items we add to our next item filter.
At the end of this long campaign, I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. One is that in spite of the partisanship,
so I don't know if that helps
progress
me
is
at all.
possible. The second
To be honest with you, I don't
there's
think it
plenty
helps me
left to
fucking
do.
at all.
Here's some progress.
I'm
Negotiate.
really glad they showed me
For this
that
filter, we're
shit.
going to dig a trench behind here, and I'm going to leave this side open so you can see what's going on. We're going to make sure we do this item filter over here. First, we're going to add 2 blocks here and here. We're going to make sure there's a redstone torch attached to this one, and we're going to add a redstone repeater facing into that one. We're going to add 3 blocks of stone along the top here. We're going to add 3 redstone dust this time. Our comparator is going to be facing in towards the redstone dust as before, and as before, our hopper is going to be attached to the comparator. This time, the redstone torch underneath here is not powering under the hopper, it's powering under this block. But that means the block becomes a redstone power source, which does lock this hopper. So the hopper that's directing stuff into the chest is currently locked, and if we start adding items into the hopper above, the comparator lights up and these items freeze in place. At this point, we're going to need more items to go in this first slot. So I brought a stack of spruce logs for this example. We're going to put those in there, and we're only going to leave 4 other blocks here in the hopper. So we're going to leave 4 blocks of stone in this case for this example, but we're going to want to swap out the stone for something less generic later, because you can imagine that any stone that flows over the top of this is also going to be picked up by the hopper. I'll teach you a trick to dealing with that a little bit later, but for now you'll see that 41 logs have been held in this hopper. There's 1 log below, so only 22 have made it to the chest. And you might be wondering, why not just add 40 more items to this filter so that we only end up with 1 more log left in that first slot, and all of the rest of the logs end up in the chest. And once again, that has to do with what happens when you build these circuits side by side. So I built another identical filter circuit on this side, and this one we're going to put in some spruce planks in that first slot. You'll notice that's not produced a high enough signal strength to activate either of these 2 circuits yet,
See,
because
so that
this
doesn't
only
work
has
either.
4
I don't know
filler
what the fuck
items
I'm
here
doing.
in the filter, so that's first slot. So I brought it to. And that is why we're not going to be using. We're going to put those in there, and we're only going to leave 4 other blocks here in the hopper. So we're going to leave 4 filler items in there. It's not out the stone for something facing in towards the redstone dust as before, and as before, our hopper is going to be attached to the comparator. This time, the redstone torch underneath here is not powering under the hopper, it's powering under this block. But that means the block becomes a redstone power source, which does lock this hopper. So the hopper that's directing stuff into the chest is currently locked, and if we start adding items into the hopper above, the comparator lights up and these items freeze in place. At this point, we're going to need more items to go in this first slot. So I brought a stack of spruce logs for this example. We're going to put those in there, and we're only going to leave 4 other blocks here in the hopper. So we're going to leave 4 blocks of stone in this case for this example, but we're going to want to swap out the stone for something less generic later, because you can imagine that any stone that flows over the top of this is also going to be picked up
Did I lose
by the
my
hopper.
fucking-
I'll teach you a trick to dealing with that a little bit later. But for now, you'll see that 41 logs have been held in this hopper. There's 1 log below, so only 22 have made it to the chest. And you might be wondering, why not just add 40 more items to this filter so that we only end up with 1 more log left in that first slot, and all of the rest of the logs end up in the chest. And once again, that has to do with what happens when you build these circuits side by side. So I built another identical filter circuit on this side, and this one we're going to put in some spruce planks in that first slot. You'll notice that's not produced a high enough signal strength to activate either of these two circuits yet, because this only has 4 filler items here in the filter, so that's not going to allow any of the other items through yet. In fact, even if I break down 8 more spruce logs so that we have another 32 planks, I can put a full stack of items in there, and that only produces a strong enough signal strength to activate this piece of redstone dust here, not the circuit on the other side. So anytime you add a full stack of items, the maximum amount of items that can go into one of these filters with only 4 filler items in there, it's not going to affect any circuits that are built directly to either side. In the meantime, though, this circuit here with all of these items can produce a higher comparator signal strength than the circuit next door. So if I put close to a full stack of logs in here, we can actually observe the items draining out of the left-hand filter. Once again, it's going to do that until the neighboring comparator signal strength decreases enough, by which time there are only 6 planks left in the filter. And let's say another stack of wood makes its way into the system. Once again, this item filter is going to completely break. It's going to leave that open to receive any items that go through the system. So any planks, any logs, they're all going to end up in this chest. So that's why when we're designing these item filters, we always want to leave 4 filler items in here and 41 items in the first slot, because that's the only way to guarantee that the system is protected against overflow. Even if you're dripping in a couple of items at a time, you're not putting full stacks into this system. Let's imagine that we fill up this entire chest of spruce logs. We've done a lot of tree chopping, and that ends up filling up the hopper behind this as well. Items can no longer exit this hopper. They can no longer be pulled out, because even when the system fills up and this comparator activates, there's nowhere else for them to go. So if a stack of spruce logs was permanently sitting in this hopper, that would be permanently activating the circuits to either side and draining the neighboring filters of their contents. And that's why you will hear people describing this type of item filter as having overflow protection. If the system begins to overflow with items, it prevents it from breaking the item filters to either side. This item filter design was popularized by Impulse SV. I consider it the gold standard of item filters, and it's what we're going to be using for the bulk storage building that we're going to construct. Naturally, if you've got 41 items sitting in your item filters, actually 42 if you count the hopper below this, you're not going to want to use this for precious resources unless you have a vast quantity of them. You don't want to leave 41 diamonds sitting around in a hopper, which is why we're going to be using these item filters for bulk storage. We're going to be storing stuff like logs and wooden items and stone and dirt and the kind of stuff that you get tons of when you have a long-term Minecraft world. We're going to be setting up a large, long-term storage building that's going to contain filters for a lot of different blocks.
We noticed she was kind of stumbling. She kind of had a head tilt, just a slight head tilt.
Before we move on to that, though, I think I should probably explain why I'm doing this. And it's really because I've outgrown the storage here in my basement. I gather wood on a fairly regular basis so I can have it for big projects like the blacksmith's house that we just built. And I think it's high time that we get some storage that's going to hold more than a few stacks of these different materials. For a start, I've already had to create an overflow chest here for all of the spruce and mangrove I thought I was going to need for that house before I decided to modify the roof a little bit. We've also got all of these nether blocks lying around in kind of unrelated barrels and chests. I have so much netherrack, I don't really quite know what to do with it all. There's various chests in here that people have, perhaps rightly pointed out, are miscategorized from my initial labeling system. These aren't exactly stone blocks, they're all dirt and sand and that kind of stuff, and we'll need to be gathering some supplies like that in large quantities. So I think we're going to need a large, long-term storage system, and it's better to build that sooner rather than later, especially since we have all of this iron that I've been smelting from my smeltery. We've got a whole bunch more from the huge iron vein. It's high time we put all of that iron to good use, and we'll need a lot of it to craft a lot of hoppers for this storage system. Naturally, we will also need a lot of comparators and repeaters, so this is the point at which we will definitely have to have gone to the nether if we want to set up any kind of automatic storage, because you'll need quartz in pretty large supply supplies. Stone is also going to be necessary in large quantities since you need that to craft both comparators and repeaters. So it's worth doing a bit of mining in order to prepare yourself for a large-scale build like this. Now, before we do any building, before we do any of the redstone setup, I'm actually going to flatten out this area slightly, since it makes sense to build all of these item filters on a flat section of ground. But for now, I think it makes sense to have at least 5 blocks of distance between our item filters, so we have a nice corridor to walk down with the item filters arranged to either side. In fact, let's make that 7 blocks wide just to make sure I have enough room on either side to leave some sort of label for what each of the chests contain. And this could be a sign or an item frame, but that many signs and item frames is going to be a lot to look at. And so instead, I think what we're going to do is something I've done in previous seasons of Survival Guide and other storage systems that I built, is to label each of these with the block they are going to be filtering embedded in the floor here so you can easily see what it is. In this case, we're going to start with all of the wood types. I think that's the most sensible thing to want to store in bulk aside from stone, cobblestone, and dirt. And of course, the wild thing about this is that there are now 9 different types of wood that can be obtained in the overworld, and that doesn't even count the warped hyphae and warped stem that you acquire from the nether. So we're looking at potentially 9 or 11 item filters just for the section where we're storing all the wood. One of the other decisions we have to make as we set all of this up is, are the chests going to be aligned with the floor here? Are they going to be effectively at waist height for the player? Do we want to embed them in the floor behind each of these blocks so that we have a little bit more vertical room to store some of these chests? And of course, we could end up with 2 double chests with a second hopper feeding into the lower of the 2 chests. That way, all of the resources will drain down into this lower chest and we can grab what we want from the chests aligned with the floor. In my case, I think I am going to put each of these chests on the surface instead of embedded in the floor, but we are going to do the double chest thing where we're going to have a second chest over the top here that's feeding the items down into the main chest. And naturally, this is going to increase the amount of hoppers we will need, since we'll need an extra hopper just to make sure all of the items get from these top chests into the main storage. But honestly, I think that's going to be a good thing, because in the later stages of my worlds, I prefer to have at least a double chest of each wood type available for larger projects, so I think it makes a lot of sense to have long-term bulk storage be a couple of double chests minimum. Naturally, what this means is that this chest here is the one that we're going to be setting up the item filter originally pointing into, and we're trusting that whatever items get filtered are going to end up in these lower chests and nothing else is going to creep on through. Now we have to decide which block we're going to use for the supporting blocks for all of the redstone we need to construct behind this item filter. And in this case, I'm quite tempted to just go with a standard wood type, considering that every time we break down a log, we get 4 planks. It's a lot cheaper to use than something like stone would be. So at this point, we can start setting up the circuits for the item filters. We're not going to fill the hoppers with items just yet, but this one down the end is going to be the one that filters the bamboo. If you're building these in bulk, the main thing I recommend doing is building them sort of from the ground up, so that you build a layer here with all of the redstone repeaters on, making sure that we're placing those on some sort of unusual solid block. That way, if we decorate this area, we're going to end up finding those and not breaking them accidentally, thinking they're a natural part of the environment, and thus breaking some of our redstone circuits. But we're going to place all of these planks here so that we can place all of the redstone torches before we put the blocks on top, and that's going to make sure that we don't have to crawl through this awkwardly, placing redstone torches later. For now, though, that should be enough to get the rest of the filters built. We place the comparators in a row facing outwards like so, and we simply fill the rest of this up with redstone dust. And this is all going to connect, but if we build our item filters properly, we're not going to have to worry about any of it powering the filters to either side. Last of all, our row of hoppers goes in, and then we're going to have a row of hoppers going across the top here as well, because the items will need to be fed in somehow. In future, we'll do an item storage system that includes water streams to do that, but the setup for that is a little bit more complicated. So for today, we're just going to be relying on the mechanism of hoppers. And we're going to leave one chest at the end here with a bunch of hoppers pushing downwards without any item filter attached to it. And this is going to be our overflow chest for any items which do not match the items we're trying to filter. So if we end up putting stone or anything else in here once we've set up the filters for all of the wood, the stone and other items are all going to make their way into this chest. We'll put a row of hoppers going in towards that, and remember that each of the hoppers below these, even though they are filtered, they are not locked, and they're going to be pulling items out of anything that travels through this hopper chain. Last of all, of course, we'll need to put a hopper here facing into that, and on top of that, we'll need to put an input chest. So when you're designing a storage system, it's always quite important to make sure you have a means of accessing this input chest. And that's an additional challenge for these buildings, really. Find some way of incorporating that into the design, whether there's just a simple staircase up to it, or if you reach up to it from the ground, or even if this entire storage system is embedded in the ground so that the input chest is simply on a level with the floor outside. Either way, we are now ready to start setting up our item filters, and here is where I'll show you a trick that I promised to show you a little bit earlier in the video. We are going to rename an item that we are going to use for the filter material for our system. In fact, I'm going to name it filter material. I'm using netherrack here because it's cheap and I don't use it for building with very often, so I'm unlikely to want to use that, and I can always go to the nether very easily and get more. It's a very quick block to mine. And that's what we're going to place in the last 4 slots of each of these hoppers. Remember, the first slot needs to be taken up with the material because that is the slot that will drain first when the hopper is pulling or pushing items. Then I'm going to drop off all of the redstone components and various bits and pieces I have in my inventory. We're going to leave the filter material in there so it doesn't accidentally end up making its way through the system. And I'm going to grab a stack of each type of wood, if I've got a stack. In terms of bamboo, I don't think I have that much. But we'll bring a stack of oak, birch, spruce, jungle, mangrove, dark oak, and we've got a little bit of acacia left, but not much. There might also be some here in the chest in the blacksmith's house. Yes, there's some more acacia in there, which once again is highlighting the reason I need to make one of these storage systems. And so we're going to go through these filters from the front and systematically add the type of wood that we're going to be filtering. And I tend to add these in terms of the order they were added to Minecraft. So oak and birch first, followed by spruce and jungle, then dark oak and acacia, then mangrove, and cherry and bamboo. You'll notice that each time we add a stack of logs into one of these filters, it drains down until there are 41 left. Unless in the case of this cherry and bamboo, and also I believe in the case of the acacia, we don't have a full stack yet, so the filter isn't going to be going anywhere. But now with each of these filters primed to receive the correct type of material, there should be 22 logs in each of the chests where we were able to put a full stack. We can start putting items into this input chest here. So let me go and grab all of the wood logs that I've left in other places. I'm probably going to leave a little bit of each type of wood down here in the basement, mostly because out of force of habit, I'm probably going to come to this storage system every so often to pick up what I need. But now I have a few different stacks of logs that I can put into the input chest, and we're going to throw some other items in here as well. So let's throw in the oak logs to start with. I'm going to put some stone in here just to make sure the system is filtering items correctly, and then we'll put in the other types of logs as well. Then as the items drain out, we're just going to add a bunch more. We'll throw in the coal and the ender chest and just give a bunch of junk into the system and make sure that it's working as intended. Now each of those items is passing through this top row of hoppers one by one, and the item filters should now be pulling out any items that are relevant to their specific filter. Right now the mangrove is starting to filter on through, and you'll notice that there are no other different types of wood in any of these chests so far. The stone has already made its way down here into the overflow chest because it wasn't recognized by any of the filters, and a bit more of that should be going through the system right now, so we can watch that coming in on the other side. Yep, that's going through. What's next on the list so we can keep an eye for it? That is spruce. And after a second or two, yep, the spruce is all starting to filter down into here as well. So this row of chests is now automatically sorting any input from a single chest and filtering out all of the wood types to be stored in these individual double chests. And I did mention that there was a reason I'm not putting the filter material through this as part of the test as well, and that is because if it starts to stack up in these item filters, because naturally the hopper above will pull them down and add them to the stacks that are in here, sooner or later that's going to add up to the overflow protection problem that we talked about earlier, and we're going to end up with one of these filters breaking. Of course, the reason we renamed it is so that it forms a different stack to any other piece of netherrack. So, for example, if I were to go and grab a bunch of netherrack out of my storage in here, if these blocks of netherrack have not been renamed, they are perfectly safe to put through the system, and we should find that those eventually make their way into the overflow chest down here at the end, along with all of the stone. If you've renamed items, they will only stack with other items that have exactly the same name. The main thing to avoid here is using items that do not stack. For example, tools, because they will output a higher redstone signal strength because they are filling up an entire stack of items, and using those could cause your filters to break. The comparators are not measuring the raw amount of items that are in a hopper, they are measuring the capacity of the hopper, and a single slot taken up by a non-stackable item counts effectively like 64 normal items. Likewise, you don't want to set up your filters with items that stack to anything less than 64. So for example, eggs or signs that only stack to 16. Using those as filter material, you risk the same problem that you have with the overflow of additional items being put in here. The comparator is going to be producing a higher signal strength, making it unreliable as an item filter. But now this chest is empty of all of the resources we put in there, and we can check each of these chests, and we'll find that every single log that we put in here has been filtered into the correct category. We ended up with a bit of extra acacia because of my demonstration with the tool earlier, and we have a little bit of cherry. We don't have any bamboo yet because we don't have enough bamboo to put through the system, and down here at the end are all of the blocks that weren't filtered in any of these 9 filters. So we've got the stone, the netherrack, the coal, my ender chests, and chests are all in there, and nothing else has been stuck in the hoppers. It's all been put through the system perfectly. So this is the beginning of our long-term bulk storage. We now have a lot more decisions to make. What other items are we going to be getting in large enough quantities that we will want to store them this way? And how are we going to lay out our storage rooms so that those can be most accessible? I like to put wood relatively close to the front of the storage build just so that we can have wood nice and easily accessible as soon as you walk through the door. So opposite that, I will probably put regularly used blocks like stone, cobblestone, the kind of stuff that is not just a building resource, it's also a crafting resource. Do we put the warped and crimson stem here next to the overworld wood types so that all of the stuff that produces planks can end up in the same place? These are all decisions that we have to make. And of course, once we've set up all of these item filters, we need to figure out what this place is going to look like. We need to come up with some sort of building that all of this is going to be housed in. You'll often find that people prefer to build these sorts of things underground, where all you need to do is decorate the interior and not the exterior of something. But I really prefer to build stuff like this on the surface because it gives you an opportunity when you view this area later to see everything you have built in this area without having to go underground to take a look at half of it. Anyway, now that you've seen the setup for these item filters, I'm going to go ahead and build a bunch more of them because we're going to have some stone and other materials here on the opposite side of my storage room, and we are going to hopefully figure out what other categories of items we want to filter.
Progress. Moving in a positive direction. We all want our lives to do that.
So I do find that interesting.
Why is progress also in our name? We've always believed insurance should do more.
Right, so
That's why we've gifted over 1,000 vehicles to veterans, funded housing programs for families in need, and why we're working to make roads safer.
You're doing good.
And housing more fair. For us, that's real progress.
Quaker Chewy Bars. Unleash the imagination.
So you could stick to just auto-sorting the wood. You could stick to having a small-scale automatic sorting system if that meets your needs. But my needs are a little bigger. And they're even bigger than you see here, because I've completed the item filters on the opposite side. We've got a bunch of the different stone types represented here, and plans for a few more here and there. But then I turned a corner, literally and metaphorically, because I was doing some planning in my creative test world to try to figure out what categories of items I wanted to do automatic sorting with. And it turned out there are quite a lot, and I didn't really want to leave any out arbitrarily. So what I've ended up with is a kind of plus shape design for a building. And I haven't designed the building yet, but I know this is what the layout is going to be. There are going to be 4 wings, and maybe we'll be able to enter by all 4 sides. But in this case, the main entrance here is going to be where the more natural and like earlier game blocks are. And then as you turn to the right on this side, you're going to have more blocks from the natural world, everything from dirt and grass and moss and that kind of stuff, through to sand, terracotta, the stuff that we're getting from deserts and badlands biomes. On the opposite side over there, facing towards the nether portal, we're going to have blocks from other dimensions, the nether and the end, when we eventually get there, included. And then further in that direction as we enter the hill, because yes, we are going to have a wing of this inside the hill, buried in the ground, or perhaps sticking out from the ground, that's where all of the precious resources are going to go, all of the stuff that we mine out of the earth. So thematically, each of these kind of works in their own way. And over here in a creative flat world, where I've been testing some of the stuff, making sure the honeycomb farm design I used still works and that kind of thing, I have come up with the categories, roughly speaking. Anywhere you see these tinted glass blocks, that's kind of a placeholder, an empty slot, something that we might leave a little bit of space in the system, either to add stuff later on, or for future blocks that might arrive in future updates that we haven't really been able to talk about yet. So, we have a bunch of the stone types, as you saw. The wood types kind of end there for now, because I decided to leave the nether, stem, and, hyphae and those warped and crimson materials over with the nether stuff. So instead, in case we get any trees in future, or in case I want to leave some manually sorted storage for leaves and other bits and pieces, that's all going to be available to us in this section here. But I'm adding prismarine and the blocks that you can get from ocean monuments on this side next to the stone types, since they are technically naturally generated and they're just part of an overworld structure that has a unique block palette. Then the natural world blocks are starting with moss and the dirt variants, mycelium from Mushroom Islands, and then we get into stuff like gravel, mud and packed mud. Mud obviously is related to clay, and then clay can become bricks or terracotta. And then we have red sand, since terracotta and the mesa are related, and then normal sand and sandstone are obviously going to be gathered in bulk as well. On the opposite side here, I wasn't quite sure what to do with this row, since that's most of the blocks that we can find from the natural world that we'd want to acquire in bulk. We obviously need places for glass and wool and some of the other blocks that can be dyed 16 different colors, but naturally, even though we have 16 blocks available on each row here, we're not going to want an individual chest for each of them. So I decided we'd put glass in one, wool in another, maybe even store some tinted glass, or maybe just have that be overflow storage for any of the wool and glass. And then we would do an individual manually sorted chest for concrete powder, concrete, and glazed terracotta. Some of these blocks we haven't even talked about in the series yet. Don't worry about it, we'll get to them later. With a bit of a gap either side, I figured there would also be room here for manually sorted workstations like crafting tables and furnaces, but also the villager workstations, maybe some functional blocks like scaffolding, that kind of thing. And of course, the natural world also deserves to have a spot for snow and ice. I put some packed ice here so that we can light the area up, because normal ice melts under certain light levels, so we don't want the entire thing to turn into a water source and flood. And likewise, there is a bit more room here for blocks from the natural world. If we wanted to have, muddy mangrove roots or something represented here, if we got a large amount of those, then we could always use a few spare slots for that. Now, moving on to the nether and the end, there's obviously a little bit of stuff from ancient cities, the deep dark biome in the natural world as well, so that's represented there. And it feels kind of otherworldly, like the stuff from the nether is. Natural nether terrain blocks around here, like the nylium from each of the forests. We've got soul, soil, and sand from the soul sand valleys, and then basalt, magma, and blackstone from the basalt delta. I also included bone blocks here. They're commonly found in soul sand valleys, and it felt like a nether-related block to put down here. Then, of course, obsidian, crying obsidian, glowstone, and ancient debris, which I haven't even brought up in the series so far, so sneak preview there. On the opposite side, we have the more structural blocks that you can get from the nether. Nether bricks, obviously a key component of nether fortresses, the warped and crimson stems, quartz, which can be manufactured from the nether, although I expect we'll end up trading a lot of it from stonemasons, which is why I've put the full quartz block and the quartz pillar here. Blackstone and Blackstone variants are going to have lots of bricks and things, because later on when we talk about Piglin Bastions, we're going to be acquiring a lot of Blackstone variants from those. So it felt like we probably needed bulk storage for one and manually sorted storage for all of the variants. Shroom lights we're going to be getting lots of once we start farming the warped and crimson hyphae. It also made for a really nice parallel with the magma block being opposite there. And then these blocks, which we haven't really had a chance to talk about much yet, but these are the two blocks from the Deep Dark that we can expect to be getting in large quantities. Or this could just be Skulk blocks, while this represents the other blocks in the Skulk family, the Shriekers, the Sensors, all of that stuff. Then when we eventually get to the end, we're going to need one for Endstone and one for Purpur blocks, because we'll be acquiring both of those in large quantities, and while they have variants, we can store those separately. Finally, our row of precious items. Naturally, we're going to be acquiring lots of full blocks of these different items. We might end up just filtering individual diamonds instead of full diamond blocks. But of course, opposite that, we want to collect some of the ore blocks as well. So if we silk touch those, they'll be available for us here. And of course, we will be silk touching every emerald ore block we find rather than fortuning those, since it's kind of useless to do that. Opposite the copper and the raw blocks over here, we have regular copper and we have fully oxidized copper, with the reason being those are the two that you would want to store in bulk. And if you want any of the middle stages of copper, you just get the oxidized copper and you scrape it with an axe a couple of times until it's the age you want. So there's really no need to store any of the in-between stages in bulk. Next to that, we have blocks of netherite, very ambitious, but we'll get back to that in future episodes. Amethyst is, of course, represented here. And we also have slime blocks and honey blocks, since we'll be doing a lot with those later when we approach some more technical builds, and it makes sense to have them both represented here in our storage system. Opposite those, another set of blocks we haven't talked about, those are frog lights, and it might be potentially worth creating a subsection somewhere in here for lighting. Once we start working more with redstone lamps, and if we end up getting lanterns in bulk, maybe we could even move the shroom lights, the glowstone, and these frog light blocks, perhaps even the sea lanterns, together grouped in one place. But for now, I think this is a pretty decent representation of all of the blocks we can expect to gather. Since it might be a little bit ridiculous to create a slice of the filter system for slabs, stairs, planks, walls, all of the different variants of blocks that we can end up getting, I've decided what I'm going to do is the same thing I did in Season 2 of the Survival Guide, and that's put a barrel above each double chest. Obviously, you can't put it directly above the double chest because then it's a full block above it and you can't open it, but having a barrel suspended above each chest for all of the different variants means that we could put the oak slabs and stairs and whatnot in there, the birch ones in there, and so on and so forth, creating manually sorted storage for all of the blocks that you can make out of these raw materials. But the majority of those are going to be things that we create on the fly rather than things that we want to store in bulk. Like when it comes to mossy stone bricks, I tend to just grab some stone bricks and some moss and make as many as I need at the time when I start building with them, so there's no need to store them long term, or if there is, they can just go in the barrel above the stone bricks chest. Naturally, all of that is only a fraction of the items we can expect to collect in Minecraft. Like, this is to say nothing of mob drops and other stuff that we would be acquiring in larger quantities. But designing this room, designing the plus-shaped layout of everything, has left me with these fairly large, I think these are 7x7 square areas on the corners, where naturally we couldn't build the item filters any closer together. They kind of have to sit on a diagonal like this for them to function properly. Or we could maybe shuffle them in a little bit, but it would just interfere with the redstone. It'd be kind of a mess. So we've got these 7x7 areas, which could be, they could be functional, they could have additional storage here that's all manually sorted, they could just be decorative and aesthetic, they could even contain staircases that might lead us up to an upstairs floor where more storage could take place. Either way, there is room for expansion in this already pretty expansive idea for a storage build. The reason I'm not doing more on this today is, to be honest, that I'm running fairly low on certain resources. We're going to be getting a lot of stone out of this hillside anyway, but I'm actually running fairly low on natural stone that I need to make redstone comparators and repeaters. We don't, strictly speaking, need to build item filters for every chest here, since there's a decent chunk of them that will be empty for now, but I think we should probably do that anyway, just so the whole thing needs a lot less maintenance later. For now, I've got a lot of digging to do, so that's where I'm going to leave it for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you've enjoyed this look at automated storage. Hopefully now you understand a little bit more about how item filter circuits work and how you can use them in your world if you want to store large quantities of some of these items. But that's going to be it from me. Thank you so much for watching the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixel Riffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.
Pixosaurus.
This whole thing is so much bigger than I ever imagined.
The broker isn't just importing and exporting dinos. They're creating them too. The dinos are loose!
Seriously, dude?
Oh, Kenji.
Jurassic World Chaos Theory. New episodes now playing on Netflix. Now available for purchase. It's the Jurassic World Chaos Theory toy collection. Dinosaurs each sold separately.
Hey everyone, ever get hit with surprise fees from your API tool after building tons of data? So annoying, right? Well, I've got a solution for you. Echo API for VS Code. It's a lightweight REST API client that's quick and easy. Here's why Echo API rocks. No login, just install and go. Scratchpad for quick notes. Ultra lightweight and fast. Fully compatible with Postman scripts. Getting started is simple. Open the VS Code Extensions Marketplace. Search for Echo API. Hit install, done. Creating requests is a breeze. Just open the Echo API tab, right-click to make a new collection, and add your request. It handles variables and environments seamlessly, with built-in system variables for random data like UUIDs and emails. For testing, just set your condition and values. No scripting needed. It supports multiple authorization types too, like basic auth, bearer, and OAuth. Echo API is growing fast. Try it out and let me know how it stacks up to other tools. Happy coding! Plus, Echo API has a desktop client, an IntelliJ plugin, and a Chrome extension called Echo API Interceptor. Pick whatever works best for you.
Hello everyone, my name is Pixel Riffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. I am having a great one. I've managed to dig out the entire area that our storage system item filter circuits are going to occupy. Obviously we'll need a little bit more space around the outside for decoration, but boy oh boy did we eat up a whole lot of the hill in the process. Naturally, the landscape around here is pretty large, so it's not exactly hurting the landscape too much, but there's a lot of hillside taken away here. And one of the consequences of that is that I now have enough stone, almost certainly, to take care of all of the repeaters and comparators that we need to craft in order to get all of the redstone circuits for the item filters. Whether or not I have enough redstone for that is another matter entirely, especially since each circuit needs 3 redstone dust, a redstone torch, 3 redstone torches per comparator, 2 redstone torches per repeater, plus another redstone dust as part of that recipe. It's going to be a lot. But in the meantime, I figured we would spend bits of today, with the watery theme that the world is currently giving me, figuring out some of the other blocks that we are going to include here, getting hold of at least a starter supply of those blocks, which we'll be filling up a lot later. And for that, we are going to go and raid an ocean monument today. But the first thing we're going to do is acknowledge this before I paper over it completely. I discovered this cave a short while ago and happened to eat into it whilst I was digging out this area, so I just wanted to show you folks this, because this seems to be the cave where any Endermen who have spawned around my starter area and have taken dirt blocks or grass blocks with them seem to have left the blocks down here. I'm fairly certain that a couple of these might have just generated as part of surface terrain, since we're still like well above sea level, so we're at the point where grass and stuff can occasionally generate in caves. But in this case, the Endermen are either taking blocks from here or they are leaving blocks here, and the presence of natural grass blocks when the rest of the blocks around here are dirt kind of indicates that the Endermen have been leaving them here. In fact, if you don't have Silk Touch in the early days of a Minecraft world, but you do see an Enderman holding a grass block, killing the Enderman to retrieve that grass block is one of the ways you can get hold of a block of grass without having Silk Touch on any kind of tool already. So, fun little Easter egg for you, I suppose. But in the previous episode, I did say that Prismarine and the Ocean Monument blocks were going to be part of this initial row of item filters, along with some of the other stone types that we get as part of the overworld and its structures. So today, we are going to grab some water-breathing and night vision potions from in here. We might have to brew up a couple of water-breathing potions, and I'm not sure I have any night vision left. I've got some water-breathing potions here in the brewing stand. Well, that's a good start. Well, we'll brew up some more potions, and then we'll head out in search of an ocean monument. And based on where we've been previously, I think I know where we can find one.
We're going to extend this a little bit.
For a little savings, Specialist Miller buys in bulk. For a lot of savings, she bundles her home and auto insurance with USAA. Putting more money back in her pocket? That's what we're made for. Call for a quote.
So, having gathered a fresh stack of food and got all my potions in order, we're going to step through this nether portal that leads to an ocean above an ocean monument. You might remember us creating this portal the first time we stepped through to the nether, and it turns out that it drops me off kind of in the sky, but very, very close to our destination today. Down there in the water, we have an ocean monument. So we're going to dive in and we're going to swim with the dolphins. Swimming near a dolphin will give you an effect called Dolphin's Grace, which makes you very fast moving in the water, and just like that, we are over here at the monument. I'm going to drink a potion of water breathing and a potion of night vision just to make sure that we can see down here a little better. There we go. And we're looking for the entrance to the ocean monument, which is usually where the two arms extend out on either side. But we're also going to be swimming around blocks wherever possible, because that helps us break the line of sight of these Guardian lasers. The laser will just sort of build up slowly, and there we go. We end up with that effect coming down. The overlay of the Elder Guardian's face indicates that we have mining fatigue. So now breaking blocks is an incredibly slow process, and we'll be better off exploring the monument to take out the Elder Guardians and remove the effect. So the Elder Guardians are these larger Guardians that you'll find around the structure here, and once again, their lasers will hit very hard, and they also have a built-in Thorns effect. When those spikes around their model retract, that is when it's safe to hit them without taking any additional damage. But we're going to be healing pretty regularly here. You might even want to bring a couple of strength potions along with you, because these creatures can hit very hard, and it's best to take them down quickly. There we go. I think we managed to take out an Elder Guardian with that last swing. We should make sure we collect the loot from the Elder Guardian, because we will get some Prismarine shards, we will get a sponge, which is actually a really useful block to have if we don't find any of it here in the monument, and there is a chance of getting the Tide armor trim from killing an Elder Guardian. It's not a 100% chance. I don't believe it drops every time you kill an Elder Guardian, but of course once we have one of those, we can duplicate them using diamonds. So the Elder Guardians will appear at 3 locations around the monument, one of which is this room here, with the pillar extending down through the floor, this sort of trestle around it, and a bunch of sea lanterns. We're going to swim around to see if we can find the next destination. They should be at the top of the pyramid of the ocean monument and in the wing on the opposite side from where we are now. And since we can't break any blocks at the moment, we're not really able to break through the walls and get to those places quickly. We'll look at ways of doing that in future episodes where we raid other ocean monuments, but instead for now, I'm just going to explore naturally, trying to find my way up towards the top of the pyramid. The other thing you should know about these is that they are procedurally generated, which means the combination of rooms and the layout of the interior of the ocean monument can be different every time. And in some places there might even be nooks and crannies you can swim through to get to your next destination. In this case, we have found another Elder Guardian swimming around the pillar in this room. Once again, they like to hang around these large pillars. And if you don't find the Elder Guardian in this room, there is a chance that it swum out into the corridors, since they are quite large, but there is a chance they can fit through these 2x3 spaces. That's the second Elder Guardian dispatched. I'm going to eat some food just to keep my health up, and we should go looking for our final Elder Guardian. Looks like we have a way up to the top of the monument through the ceiling here, and it's always worth looking up, because that will take you to this final room right at the top where the final Elder Guardian resides. And once again, we're going to try and swim around the pillars to break the laser's contact with us, and we should be able to dive in, do a couple of sword hits, and swim away. The Elder Guardian will do a little bit more damage than the regular Guardians as well, so with the Thorns effect in the mix here, you will find that they end up hitting pretty hard. And there we go, we've taken down the final Elder Guardian. We got ourselves the armor trim. That's fantastic news. That's probably a 1 in 3 chance, since there are 3 of them in the ocean monuments here, but you might come away with 1 or 2 of them. The Tide armor trim is ours. We have a bunch of sponges, we have a bunch of Prismarine shards and Prismarine crystals. We once again have mining fatigue. Unfortunately, we weren't able to defeat all 3 of the Elder Guardians before the mining fatigue effect renewed itself. So we are going to have to drink our bucket of milk to dispel that potion effect. It is basically a potion effect in the same sense that the potions we drank earlier are. But before we do that, I want to swim around a little bit to locate a room towards the back of the monument here. There is a central room where a bunch of gold blocks are surrounded in this dark Prismarine block, and that's really what I'm looking for. I think right now I'm swimming around the outside of the monument back towards that pillar room where the second Elder Guardian was, and maybe we'll be able to access it through here. But these rooms are all kind of tangled together like a maze, so it may be a little difficult to find exactly what you're looking for. There we go, though. We have found it. This large open room has a central core of sorts, which contains some gold blocks, a secondary treasure for coming here and taking on the monument. Looks like our night vision and water breathing have about a minute left, but mining fatigue has 2.5 minutes. So I'm going to drink this bucket of milk and immediately go into my inventory and refresh my water breathing and night vision potions, just so I don't end up drowning down here and so I can still see to a reasonable degree. Now we don't have the mining fatigue effect anymore, and with the Elder Guardians gone, it will not renew. It's not the structure itself that has the effect, it's the Elder Guardians themselves. So I'm going to open up the central structure where 8 blocks of gold await us, and I'm also going to start taking some of the blocks from around the Ocean Monument, because these are really desirable building blocks for some future builds I have planned. Of course, the more you open up an area like this, the more the Guardians are going to have line of sight to you and begin to shoot you. So you might want to do this sort of strategically, whilst you still have this entire area flooded with water. In future, though, we will look into ways that you can remove all of the water from these monuments so that you can explore them on foot instead of swimming around. And the trick to that really is these sponge blocks that we got from the Elder Guardians. Somewhere in some ocean monuments, you may even find rooms with a bunch of sponge dangling from the ceiling. And those are really worth looking for, since they will give you a bunch of sponge. Once you dry that out, you can use it to absorb a lot of water in a large area. For now, though, my focus is going to be on grabbing a few example blocks from the Ocean Monument. We have some prismarine bricks, which are these sort of tiled blocks like this. We have some regular prismarine, which is the craggy block around the walls and on the floor here, which you may notice, as we cut between shots in this video, changes color subtly over time. The veins start to get a little bit more green or a little bit more purple. It's a really slow animation, but after a while you'll start to notice it. I'm also really interested in getting more dark prismarine, since I think that's a really attractive block with a very unique texture. And sea lanterns are also a really valuable light source to me. Unlike redstone lamps and glowstone, which have a very yellow look to them, these sort of look more like a fluorescent LED bulb or something like that. They have a very kind of pure white color to them, even if the light they give off is the same color as any other light source in Minecraft.
This thing's over, right?
Quaker Chewy Bars, made with whole grains. Unleash the imagination.
Oh, here we go. We found a sponge room. Well, at this point, it's kind of a shame that I didn't bring a hoe with me, unless I left one in my ender chest. I did. Fantastic. Okay, it's a little low on durability, but we can repair it a little bit later. The hoe is the ideal tool for removing sponges, and that's going to make it a lot easier to clear out this room and bring a bunch of the sponges back with us, so I can demonstrate their effect. But this is really the way I recommend taking on these ocean monuments. Make sure you have water breathing and night vision potions so that you can see down here, and so that you don't end up drowning halfway through exploring one of these monuments. Then swim through the structure until you find the Elder Guardians. Don't worry too much about fighting the Guardians around you, since a lot of the time cornering one of them will deal more damage than it will help you, and the Guardians will constantly respawn whilst you are here in the monument, so it can be a little bit tricky to find a safe corner away from them. Looks like we have another sponge room here, which is wonderful news. An adequate supply of sponges is a really useful thing to have if we want to revisit this monument and clear out all of the water. But then, as I said, once you are here, killing the Elder Guardians will make sure that that mining fatigue effect eventually wears off, and you can dispel it with a bucket of milk earlier, but the chances are, if you haven't killed the Elder Guardians yet, it's simply going to renew within about a minute. If you're playing on Minecraft Java Edition, there are, of course, a few sneaky ways that you can create a breathing pocket underwater. You can bring doors with you, and placing a door will create an air bubble that you can step into, breathe, and even close the door on any of the Guardians that are following you. But remember that while you still have that mining fatigue effect, you won't be able to break the door again, so make sure you bring an adequate supply of those with you if you're intending on using them as breathing space. If you do end up running into some Guardians that are causing you trouble, the best way to approach them is to approach them, actually. If you just swim towards them, they will actually retract their thorns and swim away to try and get to a safe distance to shoot at you with their lasers. Kind of similar to how skeletons will back off if you approach them on the surface in the overworld. So the best ways to avoid getting lasered by Guardians are to swim towards them, or alternatively to make your way around a pillar and break the line of sight between you and the Guardian. Before you leave the Ocean Monument, take advantage of the opportunity to grab as many Prismarine blocks as you care to, because these are going to be valuable building blocks if anybody wants to work with this cyan color palette that they have. Looks like my last water breathing and night vision potions are about to run out. I can see the night vision effect flickering, so I'll make sure I prioritize water breathing first, since I'm about to drown, and we'll get the night vision potion on the go as well, just so we can see, although it's quite bright in these places around the sea lantern blocks. That basically puts a time limit of 8 minutes on our remaining stay here in the Ocean Monument, so I'm going to spend it grabbing a bunch more blocks where I can get them, and we'll head back towards the entrance before that 8-minute timer runs down completely. We should be able to make our way out of the Ocean Monument and get back to our base from there. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to leave a little early with 2 minutes and 30 seconds of night vision and water breathing left. We're going to make our way to the exit. We're immediately going to swim up and around the monument to make sure we break line of sight from all of these lasers that are absolutely everywhere as we leave. There we go, we can make our way through that archway as well, and we are in the clear. We have escaped the monument. There might still be a couple of Guardians on the fringes shooting at us, but it doesn't look all that likely that we're going to make our way back to that nether portal, hanging as it is in the sky above this area. And I don't seem to have brought a boat with me, so I guess we're going to have to swim back, potentially with the aid of some dolphins. While we're here, though, I will take advantage of the chance to look around the ocean floor with night vision. We can already see there is the dome of a geode over there. Geodes can often be found in ocean biomes like this if you look carefully, and there are even ocean ruins on the floor, kind of separate from the ocean monuments, that are very difficult to spot from above when you don't have night vision, since they kind of blend in with the ocean floor and there aren't really many lights down there. So those could be worth returning to and investigating if you're after some more ocean ruin loot. For now, though, I'm going to check my coordinates, make sure we're headed in the right direction. It looks like we actually needed to be headed back north this way. There might also be a couple of shipwrecks on the way that we can dive down to and investigate, but I've only got 12 seconds of water breathing left, so maybe we'll save those for another day.
Maine is built on strength and independence, but lately, our future feels uncertain. I'm an Army veteran, a mother, a doctor, so I know what it means to fight for my family, my neighbors, and my state.
Do you?
I'm running for Senate because Maine deserves better.
I think I want to do the blue.
It's time for real leadership. Someone who will work to lower costs, secure our borders, and protect our way of life. My name is Demi Kazunas, and I approve this message because I am running to stand up for you.
Well, finally, after a long journey back, we have made it home. The chests of the storage system slowly render in, and you can see I've made a little bit more progress between clips. I'm very excited to add Prismarine to our list of stone and structural blocks that's going to appear over here in the entrance hall. I think I'm going to start with raw Prismarine, and then we're going to have Prismarine bricks there. We're going to have dark Prismarine after that, and we will probably add sea lanterns right there as well. We're leaving one space at the end here in case we want to expand this with one more category in future. But for the moment, let's quickly revise what I brought home with me. We have a bunch of raw Prismarine, as I like to call it. It's basically the standard building block of these ocean monuments. We also have some Prismarine bricks, which are crafted a little bit differently to how you might expect from the example of stone bricks. We'll get onto that a little bit later. We also have dark Prismarine, a really nice looking block in my opinion. And we have sea lanterns. We got some Prismarine shards and Prismarine crystals. We ended up with close to a stack of wet sponges, which is very nice to have. All of our bottles of water here are from when I refilled the potion bottle from the water around me after I drank those. But then we have the Tide armor trim and 8 blocks of gold. Really the treasure of these ocean monuments, or the loot, at least, I guess you could call it. Because I think the real treasure of these ocean monuments is the blocks themselves. Nowhere else in the world, except for the occasional sea lantern in ocean ruins, are you going to find this block palette. And so it makes it a vital resource to master if you want to get hold of a bunch of it for future builds. But as you might expect, taking down these ocean monuments is not the only source of these blocks. They can be made renewably with the shards and crystals that the Guardians themselves drop. And it's not just Elder Guardians. Regular Guardians will also drop both of these, along with some raw fish, which it's kind of a surprise I don't have, actually, but that's probably just a sign of how few Guardians I actually fought whilst I was in there. I was really targeting the Elder Guardians first and foremost. With a bunch of prismarine shards, if we put them in a 2x2, you'll be able to make one block of regular prismarine. And I didn't bring home enough, actually, to demonstrate the prismarine brick crafting recipe, but if I just type pris in there, you'll see it here in the crafting interface. 9 prismarine shards will get you the slightly more structural looking prismarine bricks. So they can be a little bit expensive. They're twice as expensive plus another shard extra than the regular prismarine, but they are a very specific color and they don't change color over time like normal prismarine does. To craft the dark prismarine, you actually need some black dye in the center of there, and that used to be an ink sac from Squid, but it's specifically changed to black dye so that you can use other sources of black dye in the crafting recipe. And once again, 8 prismarine shards are required, plus a black dye in order to make one block. So it can be quite an expensive block to work with, which is why I like to pull as much dark prismarine out of the monuments themselves as I can. Lastly, if we refresh our look at the crafting interface here, I can put a plus shape of prismarine crystals and 4 prismarine shards on the corners to create another sea lantern. And I think I'm going to do that right now just to leave us with 20 sea lanterns. Seems like a nice round number to me. We could go back with more night vision and water breathing potions and grab the rest of the sea lanterns out of there, and we would end up with a couple of stacks depending on the layout of the monument. Now, the wet sponges that we have gathered are some more interesting loot from the monument because they have a functionality that you can't really get anywhere else, at least not without a great deal of effort. We're going to walk up into the house here, and I'm going to put one of these sponges into the furnace. I'm just going to put it in here with a couple of sticks for now because I don't intend to end up drying all of them this way, but over time the furnace will dry out these sponges and you end up with a block that is just called sponge, not wet sponge. And visually speaking, you can see the difference. The wet sponge looks naturally a lot wetter. It even has drips of water that will come off the side or drip from below, but the difference between these is that the sponge can now be used to dry out a large area of water. Let me provide you with a quick example down here where this river biome has sort of been cut off by the land. This will provide a nice demonstration, I think, because we can place the wet sponge in here. It won't do anything. If we place the dry sponge in here, suddenly it removes a large area of the water around it, and water comes rushing back in from any water sources that have been created around the outside, but this area here is clear of water. If I were to barricade this off where the water sources are flowing in,